Now that you've got Xcode installed and up and running, we're going to take a few moments to familiarize ourselves with the Xcode interface and build and run our first app. Xcode is what's known as an integrated development environment, or IDE, meaning that you can do all your designing, coding, and running the actual app within a simulator from Xcode. So let's see how it works. You can see here we've got the new project window. It allows us to select from a range of templates. We've got iOS selected here. You can also use Xcode to develop for other Apple platforms. Within iOS, we've got a range of templates including games, augmented reality apps, that's new for Xcode 9 and iOS 11, document-based apps, master detail apps like the Mail app if you've ever used that on your phone or iPad, and a few more, all of which we will see later on in the course. For now though, we're going to start with the simplest template, the single view app. So select that and click next, and then you'll be able to select a few options for your project. The first is the name. So I'm going to enter my first app. You can really call it whatever you like, but that makes sense. We don't need to worry about the team for the moment. We'll be using that later on. But if you've got a company name, then you can put that there, or you can just put your own name if you don't have a company yet. And then you need to enter an organization identifier. Now this is like a domain name in reverse. So a domain name might be something like google.com. For identifiers, we put the com first. So usually it would look something like com dot and then your company name, something like that, or your own name, again, if you don't have a company. So something like com dot and then your name would be absolutely fine here. And we're going to be using Swift. We're not using core data yet in the course. We won't be using tests right now, but you can leave those selected. All right, that's all the options. So click next, and then just choose where to save the app. I'm just going to put it on the desktop. And notice that by default, Xcode provides a version control. This is something we'll look at specifically later on in the course, but I would leave it selected for now. All right, that's all the options. So now click create, and that will create your very first app. And this brings us to the fairly busy looking Xcode screen, which will now take a few moments to just break down so that we can understand all the different parts of it. So first off, on the left here, we have a list of all the files in our app. We'll be working with all of these at various points in the course, but for now, there are really two main files that you need to be aware of. The first is viewcontroller.swift. So quickly click on that, and you'll see that the main window updates with the content of that file. So this is where we'll be writing most of the code for our apps. And what we've got here is just some template code to get us started. We'll look into that in more detail in a couple of videos' time. But for now, we're going to jump to the other file that we're going to be paying a lot of attention to in the early stages of this course, and that's the main storyboard. So this is essentially the screen of your app, and this is where you can design the look of your app, bringing in things like labels and images, buttons, and text boxes. Okay. So hopefully you're getting the idea that the central window here is where we'll be working most of the time, and the left bar here contains the files that we'll be editing. On the right here, we've got a context sensitive menu, so this will change depending on what you've got selected at any given time. So if we go back to our viewcontroller.swift file, we then get a different bunch of settings. So don't worry about what all those settings are right now. We'll go through them as we start adding code and images and buttons to our apps. We'll just quickly click on My First App at the top left there, and that will take us back to the screen we had at the beginning, which has the basic settings for our app. So we've got the app name, the bundle identifier, as we saw earlier, starts with com dot and then first name, last name, or your company name, and then the name of the app. Got version number, build number. You can log in with your Apple account if you want, and then various other options like device orientation supported, iOS versions, etc., etc. We'll come back to those later on in the course. But before then, I just want to show you these buttons at the top of the interface. So first, if we click the two rings there, you can see that splits the main view into two. And we'll be using this a lot, particularly if we're writing some code and interacting with the main storyboard. It can be very useful to be able to see two at once. If if you want to get rid of this window there, you can just click that button at the bottom, and then this view here where we can see the main window of our app and write code at the same time is a very useful one. We can also arrange those so you can have them top to bottom or left and right, or if we click that left hand button we get back to our single window. The two arrows there allow us to work with version control, which we're not going to be worrying about right now, but we will see how to work with later on in the course. And then these buttons here allow us to bring in or get rid of the various toolbars and other menus. And there's also a bottom one as well, which is very useful for debugging apps. Again, we'll see that later on in this section. Okay, that finally brings me to the top left of the interface, and specifically to this play button, which allows us to run our app. So just before we press that, I'm going to select one of the simulators. I'm going to be running this course mostly on the iPhone 7, but you can choose any simulator you like, whichever one fits best in your screen. So now we can just run that, and we get asked to enable developer mode. So I'm going to enable that, and you'll need to enter your Mac password to do that. And then it will launch the simulator, which looks like this. One of the new features in Xcode 9 is that the simulator actually looks like the device that you're working with. So this looks like an iPhone 7, which is really nice. And there, in fact, is your first app that you've ever run. It's not particularly impressive because it's just a blank screen, but don't worry, we'll be adding interface elements to that in the next video. For now, it's worth knowing that you can use the hardware menu to do a bunch of things, like changing the device orientation, or pressing the home button, which then gets you back to the home screen, and you can interact with this in much the same way as you would a normal iOS device, and you can run all the normal apps as well. So you really have got a fully functional iOS device, and then you can go back and run your app again if you want to. Alright, so I hope that makes a little bit of sense of this slightly complicated Xcode interface. You'll see we've now got some comments in the bottom toolbar here. You usually get a fair few messages, most of which you can ignore, unless of course your app is crashing, in which case you normally get something hopefully quite useful down here in the logs area to let you know what's gone wrong. Alright, so that's Xcode. Now that we've completed our whistle-stop tour and run our first app on our iPhone 7 simulator, it's time to start customizing our app, and we'll do that first by adding labels to it.